When we look at poetry, we want to remember that poetry is about conveying experience. We said in the fall when we studied poetry, we can't read it like we will a play or a fiction because it's not going to have a plot. It's going to explore an idea and it's going to try to connect to the reader in a little bit of a different way. When we talked about metaphors, we read Langston Hughes' poem, Dream Deferred. It's sometimes referred to as Harlem. It's the first poem that's linked in today's campus assignment. If you're looking at it here, are you going, oh, that does look kind of familiar? I do remember it. And probably the line that you're looking at now, and you're going, oh, wait, is this one? Where you're going, oh, is that where the title came from? Uh-huh, yeah. Langston Hughes wrote this poem well before the play. Lorraine Hansberry was like, that is a perfect metaphor to try to explain what we have. And so remember, the poem discusses a dream deferred. Anybody remember the definition of the word deferred?
Isn't it like stray away?
Yeah, to stray away, to put to the side. Think about deferred adjudication. That might be one of those that some of you are like, yeah, I know that one from there. So when we're looking at this, what happens to that dream put off to the side? Hey, tell me some characters in the play that put their dreams off to the side. What did Beneatha put off to the side? Well, she's still pursuing it, right? And she's focused on it. And by the end, does it seem like she's putting it off? Not really. Think a little bit more. Who's a character that literally like puts something off to the side that they want? They don't get it right away. Walter, what's he want? Who else? Think about the big one. Who's been wanting something for a lot of years and hasn't gotten it? Mama. So here we explore this concept of what happens when we put these dreams off to the side. And just as the reminder, let's reread the poem here. Hughes says, does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat? Or crust and sugar over like a syrupy sweet? Maybe it just sags like a heavy load. Or does it explode? So we see the use throughout the poem here of metaphors to convey this idea of what happens to those dreams you put off to the side. So when we look at this raisin in the sun thing, think about a raisin. It's dried up, it's shriveled. Is it as good as a grape? Nah, it's got its own thing, but it's not as good. And so here we start with something a little simple. Is it as strong as to say, hey, your dream blows up? Turning a grape into a raisin, is that really a bad thing that happens to a dream that gets put to the side? It just dries up? Not really. Is it as bad as exploding? No, not at all. So you notice that as the poem goes on, these metaphors strengthen. They get stronger, and they give us a stronger idea of what happens to that dream as you put it off. Could we maybe say that the longer you put the dream off, the worse the effect is? Look at that. Think about that. And so here, we explore it in different ways too. Not only do these get stronger, but to some degree, as we go through this part, this stanza, they get grosser. If that dream just turns into a raisin, you're like, okay, like I could still eat a raisin. It's not that bad. How many of you want to sit down to some rotten meat that's got like that crusty exterior as it starts to like get nasty? Notice that it also gets grosser as we go. It's less appealing. Just like these dreams. When we first think that we want something, we're excited. When it doesn't happen, we're disappointed. And as it goes longer, it gets into our soul. It starts to infect us. And so notice here, she decides to borrow this line to help to emphasize, what these dreams are like when we put them off. Notice that she doesn't pick rotten meat. She doesn't pick the heavy load. She picks a simpler one. Because by the end of the play, does someone get their deferred dream? So notice that here we kind of end up in the wash. Walter might not get what he wants directly, but does he get what, he might not get the liquor store, but what does the liquor store kind of represent for Walter? Huh? His future. And what does he want to do with his future? Provide. He wants to step up. He wants to be a man, right? So even though he doesn't get the liquor store by the end of the play, does Walter get what he wants? Yeah, and that's the thing. You kind of go, okay, he started off with this material want. I want a liquor store. But when we start to look at, well, what does the liquor store really represent to him? That opportunity to provide, that chance to be a man, that chance to make some decisions. Well, he definitely does that. And he comes into that manhood by the end. And so notice, it's why she kind of sticks to this first metaphor. And think too, plants have a strong meaning in this play. Gardening, planting, doing. Some of you got that yesterday on the test, and then some of you were like, what's a symbol in the play? And you're like, money's a symbol. Money's money. Money's not a symbol. So think about how choosing that raisin imagery helps us to emphasize the plant. Helps us to emphasize some of those things. The plant is good. The plant is alive. Mama cares for it. But if she left it off on that windowsill for too long, it would dry up. It would die. So that little plant is like, yeah, I might not have a house and I might not have a garden, but I have something that's kind of like it. So if you take a look at what we're going to do today assignment-wise, for each of the 2 poems we're going to look at, there are 3 questions you have to answer. Hey, did we just answer all 3 for this one? More or less. Now there's a second poem. Obviously, the second poem is a lot longer than this one. So not exactly the one I can write on the board. Let's take a couple of minutes to look at the second poem. It's titled Still I Rise. It's written by Maya Angelou. 20th century African-American poet, kind of came into her own in the 80s and 90s. And, if you remember Oprah, she was one of those Oprah picks, and she got pushed by Oprah into the mainstream. So take a couple of minutes, read Still I Rise, and we'll kind of talk about, hey, how can we answer those questions to make sure we're good to go? everybody had a chance to kind of look? All right, so 3 questions we have to answer. Let's start with the one that might be the most tangible and easiest. Which characters does this poem remind you of? So remember, the title is Still I Rise. And as the poem goes on, this repetition of the phrase, I rise, I come forward, I come up, becomes stronger. Who's someone in the play that kind of, to you, that speaks to?
Mama or Walter?
Okay, let's start with Mama. Why Mama? Anybody, it doesn't just have to be Tristan.
Just everything she's been through, like, she's still here and happy, still there for her family.
Absolutely. And, especially if you're looking at Mama, not just that constant idea that she has that things can get better, but think too about how the poem makes reference to the dream of the slaves, someone who is sort of the result of their ancestors that have struggled. Mama specifically talks about that struggle that she has faced her whole life. And so think about how, in a lot of ways, this could definitely reflect her. Why Walter?
Janet started at the bottom, trying to be the man who would be with Mama, but in the end he did.
Yeah, so that struggle that we see from Walter, where throughout the play, he's not on a constant uptick where he keeps succeeding, and it's little steps and he keeps getting better. There are moments that Walter fails miserably and has to pick himself back up. And, you even think about towards the end of the play, they are still beating Walter into the ground because of the choice that he made to call Lindner. And Mama has to remind Benita, like, hey, he's at his lowest, like, give him a break. So we have that for sure. Great connection here. Is there a wrong answer? No, and that's what's most important. Maybe the only wrong answer is, I don't know, Lindner, Travis. Not going to have a lot to talk about there. What's most important is, how do we see these connections there? And as we move into writing an essay starting tomorrow, we're going to start kind of outlining and getting our ideas together. The biggest part about talking about any kind of piece of fiction, whether it's poetry, a play, a book, is that the work is going to inform you when you're correct. You're going to be able to pull evidence from there to support the things that you're saying. There are definite moments that you're not right. But what's great about it is you can be right in a lot of different ways. It allows you the opportunity to kind of connect to it. So this question about who it reminds you of gives you that chance to just explain your thinking. What do you see in the work that leads you that way? There are 2 other questions for this poem that we're going to answer today. So altogether, there are 6 questions you need to submit today. We did the 3 here for Dream Deferred. They should be easy to put together. We kind of talked about the last one here. That leaves you 2 to do on your own completely. I'll get out of your way so that you have a chance to do that and turn in your work. Remember, this is going to get pushed to next 6 weeks. We are done with grades for this 6 weeks. So if you still have questions with what you're